Drawing board a little bit.
New Orleans. I mean, it's like
It's not often that you have
shops. Very much like French Quarter.
no.
Remind me of. Oh, and there's the pool again. I got you got there Saturday night. It's Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, moving on to item 2, approval of the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from last meeting?
Move approval.
I have a motion. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Moving on to item 3, the adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or amendments they'd like to make to the agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. Moving on to item 4, consent agenda.
Approval.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving item 4, the consent agenda, items A through D, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the consent agenda passes. Moving on to item 5, visitors and presentations. I know we're joined by both our fire chief and our police chief here today to report on activities of the department. I think we're going to start with Chief Peterson, our fire chief.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I apologize. I was gone a couple weeks ago fighting a fire, so that happens. It was a very long, stubborn fire. It was 14 below wind chill at the time and snowing, winds out of the north at 14. So it was a lovely firefight. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to give a quick update as far as 2021 goes. So bear with me as we go here. I'll keep it short and sweet, but we'll move on. So just as a reminder to everybody very quickly, our service area cover the city, obviously the township, Delwood, Birchwood, Gem Lake. It's about 35 square miles and just over 40,000 residents that we cover at this time. So we cover a pretty large area, a lot of responsibility within that. One of the things that we continue to be challenged with within the department is our call volume. So we had a little bit of dip with COVID last year, but it was only about 3%. And I thought, wow, that's we're in trouble if it only went down 3% when COVID hit, as much as everything shut down for a while. So indeed, this last year it jumped up pretty significantly. So it was a 14% increase in our call volume, which is a new record for us as a department, and that trend doesn't seem like it's going to slow down anytime soon. A lot of departments around us had the same or similar numbers as far as call increases, mainly due to medical calls, which I'll get into here shortly. So most of the calls we go on are ambulance calls, as our advanced life support transport that we do, and with that, the ambulances are gone a lot of the time. It's about 80% of the calls. This is normal for any fire department that does both fire services and ambulance services. The majority of the call volume will be ambulance services. So that trend continues for us. It's pretty consistent. Here's a call by month. So you can see the blue bars are the medical calls, and the red bars are for the fire calls, and it is pretty cyclical. We see this is a very similar pattern that we see every year. And early spring, late fall, there's a little bit of a slowdown, and then it gets busy in the summertime, it gets busy around the stress of the holidays, and we just kind of repeat that pattern over and over and over again. So fire calls, of course, are up a little bit in the summertime because people are much more active in doing things, and so that attributes to that. So as far as the major categories go, the software we have, we can drill down pretty significantly. So we have to kind of compartmentalize these as to what does this mean? What are the major categories that we go on? So I put them all together here for you so you can see. So fires, we have 78 of those. Ruptures, explosions, overheats. You can see all the numbers there. I'm not going to read it to you. You can see the majority of the calls, again, are medical calls. So we're just under 1,000 fire/rescue calls that we did. And then you can see some breakouts as far as service calls, good intent calls. That can be alarms. It can be a lot of different things. So they're pretty broad categories. So the top fire incidents for us last year was building or structure fires. There were 25 of those, and then The other one was cooking, passenger vehicle fires, brush fires, and rubbish fires. And we have a picture coming up here. Well, we're going to get to the medical calls first. I'll show you in a second. As far as brush fires, it was an unusual year. Was on a emergency management call today, and they anticipated another pretty significant wildland season this year because of how dry it is. They expect that to continue this year, which we saw some of that ourselves last year. So for medical calls, these are, again, the top 5 categories that were there. So sick person, and this is how we're dispatched. This isn't necessarily what we actually find. So we might get, a sick person is this, but it's actually a cardiac issue or whatever. So this is according to what we get dispatched to. So sick people, falls, a lot of psychiatric patients, breathing problems, and unconsciousness. So lot of very sick people in this area. Our medical direction always goes, wow, you guys get a lot of these, or wow, you get a lot of difficult cases. So the crews do a great job and provide a very, very high level of care. Our response time is 5 minutes, 52 seconds. That's pretty good for the size of area that we cover. That's only for emergency calls. So if we get called routine or it's not a significant call, we don't include that. This is just for emergency calls, just within our response area. So we're getting called all over the place. The EMS system in general, for the ambulance system in this area, in this whole state, is struggling right now. And so we've been called to farther and farther places away because of that. And we rely on them helping us out, too, when we get busy. So here's some pictures from this. Is a fire up in Llano Lakes that we went to last year. This burned over 130 acres, I think, if I remember right. It was a long time ago now. But this is very dangerous in this area because of this, what we refer to as the urban wildland interface. So we have a lot of homes and a lot of buildings, and yet we have a lot of, as you can see, that flare up there where that firefighter is starting, I was there when I took this picture, and it was pretty slow moving fire, and then it hit it, and it was like somebody threw gasoline on it because it just hit that dry material and just took off rapidly. So these things can change very, very quickly on us, and that was a plane that came down from up north. I can't remember. Cambridge, I believe, and was dropping water on the head of the fire, cutting it off as we were fighting it on the ground also. So that's where those pictures came from. As far as mutual aid goes, so us providing help and us receiving help for both fires and for ambulance calls, we helped out others 38 times. And fire received 25 times, so it's pretty balanced. And you can see the medical calls, like I mentioned. We are doing a lot of medical calls, helping out other agencies, and so we're a little off balance there, but nonetheless, they're coming into our area to help us out as well. So that is kind of how the system works. The picture on the left there was a fire actually in Maplewood, and then the picture on the right was a recent fire we had in Gem Lake on a commercial building. Again, 20 below wind chills. We were there for 6 hours. It was miserable. So I'm waiting for better weather, and then these fires can come back around again. So our staffing, we promoted 2 part-time firefighter paramedics. So we got approval to hire 2 additional full-time employees. So we had 12. Now we have 14, and that was basically done early last year, or at the end of last year, early for this year, if you will. And so we very much appreciate that. That has helped us out. We promoted 3 people to full-time captains. So we didn't have any full-time line supervision before this last year. So at the end of the year, we were able to promote 3 people to captains. That's really helped with our crews and getting more training done and more consistency. So that helped us out a lot. And then we hired 4 part-time firefighter EMTs that have since that time joined us. So we continue to add people. As far as our department training goes, this is a live fire training, so this is what we did on purpose. This is yet another fire. And so we did over 800 hours of training, and that's training subjects. That isn't how many people we train, so it would be significantly more than that if we counted it per person. But it's a lot of training that we put on ourselves. included both, fire, EMS, and rescue, all the 3 categories that we do a lot of. We decided this last year we had a dive program for a number of years, and we decided to, after many years of me being here now, we decided that it was time to not be part of that program anymore. And one of the things that I noticed in my time here was that oftentimes the dive operations ended up being a body recovery. And they were very slow, and it took a long time to get that. And there's this program out there called the Rescue Swimmer Program. So diving is low frequency, high risk, and so that always makes me a little nervous. And so because of a lot of other factors, I decided, let's take a look at this other program. So we decided to go to what's called a Rescue Swimmer Program. So you still have a snorkel and fins and so on, but it's geared on rapidly getting to somebody and getting them out of the water. So we have plenty of bodies of water within here. And realistically, if you're viable, you're going to get to somebody pretty quick, and you're going to get them out. And so this is actually, we were looking for somebody that drowned in the lake last year. This is what this scene looked like. And it took a long time to find the person and get them out of the water. So that was kind of like, yeah, you're making the right decision moment for me. So we're happy with that, and that'll be a good program. Another thing that we added, that device that is being held there is called a UE. That's the brand name, and it is a video laryngoscope, so we can insert it in somebody's mouth and look at their vocal cords, and that helps us to more easily intubate somebody and make sure that we place the breathing tube appropriately at the first try. And with that, we added, so we got that 2 years ago, and then we added this last year what's called rapid sequence induction, which is we use a series of medications to sedate and paralyze people under very specific circumstances. Like, let's say they're seizing and we can't control their airway, and they might aspirate and then cause pneumonia and make them very sick after that event. So this allows us to chemically sedate and paralyze somebody so we can secure their airway, which is a big deal. And many of the agencies around us have been doing this for a while. This is new to us, and so we're very happy to have this. It's a skill we don't do a whole lot of, but it's a big deal that we're trained to it and we're competent in it now. We also added what's called the rescue pump. Might look a lot like a toilet plunger because that's where it came from. There was a lady that a doctor on the West Coast was studying. She had successfully resuscitated her husband 3 times by using a toilet plunger. She stood over the top of him because he wasn't strong enough to do CPR, and she pumped up and down on his chest, and it worked. And they said, there must be something to this. And so the doctor that was aware of this case then went on to do some other research, develop this device. And so what it does is it creates a negative pressure inside your chest, which seems weird, but it creates a negative pressure inside your chest, which helps with blood flow, which then to your heart, which then helps with blood flow to your brain. And one of the things they figured out is that one of the large studies they did is the survival rate went up about 49%. So although it seems like a very rudimentary device, it seems to work really well. And so we added that to how we do things. We also added a program called Hand-Tevi, which is specific to pediatrics. Pediatrics, as you can imagine, is very stressful. When you have pediatric calls, we don't have them very often. But when you do, it's a big deal, and you want to make sure you get the medications right and the treatments right. And so this system is designed very specific to that. It's color-coded. They have an app. It makes it a lot easier under those high-stress situations for us. So we added that to what we can do, which is great. Did a lot of community outreach. Did 53 events, even though it was still COVID. So we did a lot still, including all of these things. So a lot of different drive-bys, tours, and so on. We have our community events coming up. And so the council, mayor and councilmember Hughes haven't been on the old 1929 La France yet, but hey, it's coming up. You're going to have to probably bump some of the people off, though, if you want to hang on the back or whatever. So it's a lot of fun, so we'll make sure that's running. So we did all these events and also all of these events. So it was a lot of stuff, and we love the community engagement. We're very much looking forward to doing it again this year. and getting back to some of the things we had to skip last year. So good stuff. We also did early on host a COVID-19 vaccine at the South Fire Station, which was quite an endeavor. And then they realized there was going to be so much demand that they needed to move it to the South Campus because there was just too many people for that size of a venue. So did a lot of good stuff. The department itself, so we got the new ladder truck, which most of you have seen. I think all of you have seen. And so that was highlighted. The manufacturer, Pierce and McQueen, who's a local rep, asked if we could display it at the State Chiefs Conference this past fall. So we brought it up there and put it up on display. It was very well received, and people really enjoyed it. And so thank you for that. We also made the cover of the State Chiefs magazine for the conference, which was pretty cool for our department. So that's a picture of one of our firefighters at a training burn that we did. And then I received the Fire Officer of the Year award for a population greater than 10,000, which is a huge honor for me personally and professionally. And I really view that as a reflection of all of us. I couldn't have accomplished what I did without all of your help and without administration's help and the firefighters working with me. So I see it as a success on all of our parts, not just me personally. So thank you for that. So that is all I have. Julie's up next.
Council, any questions or comments for Chief Peterson? Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of statistics that are up there. Just my question is, are we stabilized? You know, when you started, and what is it, 5-6 years ago now? 5 years ago, we wouldn't have wanted to do this presentation with this many people from White Bear Lake in the room, in terms of response time and going out for local aid. Because it would have scared people. It would have scared us. I mean, I remember being in that meeting thinking, holy buckets. So 552 on response time, 25 mutual aid calls and fire, 108 mutual aid on. Are we to normal? Do you feel like you're stabilized now?
We are. The calls per full-time employee is still very high. And so one of the things we're dealing with now is just stress and then physical exhaustion. Because they're just going all the time. So as far as response, it's pretty good. As far as our employees, the workload's pretty heavy.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Peterson, 3 questions, but I'll ask you to hold one of them till after Chief Swanson has had a moment. So we've had we have added full-time staff. We've changed our model. In our budget discussions last fall, we anticipate that there will continue to be need for additional staffing. Can you give us an update on what you're thinking, especially in light of we're continuing to see an increase in the number of calls? What's your sense of where that might be going?
So we need to continue to add staff. As far as full-time staff, we continuously try and hire part-time staff, and they kind of come and they go for a variety of reasons. And one of the things, like the last part-time staff hiring, we started with 18 applicants, made 7 job offers. Within 1 week, 2 of them got full-time job offers somewhere else. One of them didn't get through the process, so we were down to 4. And so we just keep doing that over and over, and that there's a lot that goes into that. So to help stabilize that, to continue to add full-time staff will be very beneficial to the department and the people that we serve.
Okay. Can you speak to, so clearly the last year has been a really challenging issue, from not just from the issue of community health, but the health of our firefighters. How have we done in terms of COVID, in terms of the stress and burnout that we have seen, need for mental health support, et cetera, et cetera? Where are we at? What are we doing? Where's that going? So
we have a lot of support for the staff, and when we interact with them a lot. Is a very stressful year. They're tired, they're stressed out, but they keep going. We have a good support group, both professionally and personally, and some of the staff have you can see it. And some of them I've talked to personally, like, you don't seem like you're doing okay. And, I got some things, and we talk through it, and they're still here, and they're okay. But it is a never-ending issue, that chronic stress, if you will, that they deal with. And we want them to maintain good coping mechanisms as far as how they deal with that. So we're doing okay, but every one of them would look at you and go, it's been a tough year.
Okay. So the question that I would like you to address afterward, and Chief Swanson, maybe this will be a cue for you as well. In terms of our community, where are we at on mental health support, the ability for us, for our firefighters, for our police officers to be able to access professional support in those cases where it's clear that there's some type of mental health issue going on? Where are we at on that? We added that a few years ago. I'm just trying to get a check the pulse on that one.
Okay. All right. I'll wait till Julie's done.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
So all that, plus a 14% increase year over year, you and your department deserve the hardware that you got home. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I'll echo the thank yous from the council. Chief Peterson, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work. Chief Swanson.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council, for having us here tonight. Before I go into it, I just want to also say thank you for the support that you give both of our departments throughout the year. Chief Peterson talked about the equipment and the infrastructure, and we really do appreciate it. We both will say we have the best departments in Minnesota, but that's not without kudos to you and to our community for supporting us, so thank you for that. So our presentations are going to be very similar, just so that you could follow along. So for point of reference, most of you know this, but we do have a big audience tonight. The White Bear Lake Police Department covers the city of Gem Lake and the city of White Bear Lake. So we do not have quite the extensive coverage that the fire department has, but it does keep us pretty busy. We have 31 sworn officers and 10 civilian staff. So we are full strength with police officers, which is a good place to be, and we're actually full strength with our civilian staff as well. So when we talk about the civilian staff, that includes our community service officers. We have a licensing specialist, 2 records administrative assistants, an IT person that we share with the city, and then we have 1 person dedicated to our cameras, our our media uploads, evidence, things like that. So here's our calls for service, and so a little different from the fire department. We have seen a decrease in the last 2 years, but I really do believe that's attributed to COVID for us, and also for the new model of fire. We have less business. We had businesses closing earlier. There aren't too many bars open in White Bear past midnight anymore. Very seldom, and I'm sure that's even with the opening of things. I think it's because they don't have the staff, and when they're closing at midnight. Or 11 even, that really has reduced our calls for service, and you'll see that in our report that we have later on the agenda for the alcohol report. It has decreased our calls for service to our bars. It's decreased our DWI enforcement. And then also like I said, we have less responding because we have a full-time fire model, which is very helpful to us. It's not that we don't go, but we have people that are getting there right away. And so sometimes if we are prioritizing calls, it's very helpful to the police department to have that. And then also there's less traffic in the city with COVID. It was kind of a ghost town for those couple of months in 2020. So there's a significant decrease, but I expect that it's going to go up. So here are some of our major calls for service, or maybe the ones that are of interest. And I have traffic stops on there on the top, because when you read or hear about high-profile incidents involving the police, they tend to be with those traffic stops. So, and we do a lot of traffic in our city. We've talked about it in work sessions because there's been some changes at the county attorney level of what they'll charge or what they want us to be doing, but we still find it very important in our community to run traffic stops, and it's a great way to find some other things that do improve the quality of life within our city. And you'll see there that of our traffic stops, half of them are verbal warnings. So only half the people are being cited on average. And then at one point, when I first took over as chief, we had over about 300 DWIs a year. And a little bit of the increase for that is because we had a DWI officer for 3 years. But again, the bars are closing, Uber's around, people have become much more responsible. They found out how expensive a DWI is. And then I have the assault and disorderly conducts together. And the reason that I have those broken out is the assault calls there are more or less arrests or citations that were issued for assault or domestic assault. But a lot of those calls also fall under the disorderly conduct. That's a very broad topic that we use, or call type that we use. It might be that we go to a fight at a bar, or there's the panhandlers on the side of the road. Those all get classified as disorderly conduct, and sometimes they rise to the level of an assault, and sometimes they come down and become one of those people in crisis. So it's just a very generic type for things being a problem. The thefts are high, and the best defense for that is lock your cars, leave nothing in them. And then you'll see the catalytic converter calls. That's extreme. We never had those 2 years ago. They're not all thefts. Sometimes that's somebody believing their catalytic converters being stolen. It might just be things that they're seeing on their surveillance, but a good chunk of them really are catalytic converter thefts. Then the burglaries are pretty consistent. Auto theft, we're doing pretty good. Agencies around us, the Sheriff's Department has an auto theft task force dedicated to that. Roseville Police Department has that. We just don't have the need, obviously, for it, but we have the benefit that they assist us when we have those incidents taking place. Robberies are, for those that aren't familiar, robberies are of a person. So, a lot of people will say, I've been robbed in my house. Unless somebody confronted them and took something from them, that's a burglary. So we had about 7 robberies. And then that last one is the person in crisis. And so what I want to just mention with that is that's basically a mental health call. Those are the ones that eventually got coded as a person in crisis. But I would say 25% of our calls, maybe even 30%, really are with somebody in crisis. It just might mean that the call then becomes an assault call or something like that. But we do see a significant amount of people in crisis, and I'm going to have that in a future slide that will talk a little bit about the services that we offer. So something that's pretty big that you have not heard from me before is the drug overdoses. So there's a website that we all track on in Minnesota, and it's the OD mapping. And so when we have an overdose, we do put that in there. That's our media tech person takes care of that for us. So in 2020, when we started at mid-year, we had 16 non-fatal and 5 fatal. And then in 2021, we dropped down a little bit. And this year we have it's 2 non-fatal because we had one today, and then 2 fatal. And those 2 fatal actually took place on the same day. So it's a concerning number. And I have Ramsey County's overdoses for the past 30 days here. I mean, those are big numbers because they are taking resources of the police department. Just one person doesn't go to that. We usually send 2 or 3. The fire department has to go. Our officers do carry Narcan, and we do utilize it several times a month. And again, we're probably not tracking the greatest with those. One thing of note is our records management system is pretty outdated, and as you remember, we're updating that this year, so we will have better statistics in the end. But again, those are pretty concerning numbers because they're significant. And then the weapons calls. So the reason that I put these out there, because like traffic stops, these are the other ones that usually cause concern for the police department. So we've actually had 3 shootings in our city, which I've been here 22 and a half years, and we haven't had 3 shootings in a year in my career that I know of. One of them was of a person. They were shot. They were transported. It was not random probably, but it was concerning. He was in the home and he was in a room where kids stay. The kids just didn't happen to be there that night, so he survived it. We are still working that case. And then we've had 2 other shootings. One was in a parking lot. Well, actually, both were in a parking lot. One was in a parking lot of an apartment complex, and one was in a bar parking lot. And then we've had 6 calls where there's been traffic stops and there's been firearms recovered, and then there's been charges for that. So of those 25 other weapons calls, there might be guns on traffic stops, but maybe it's somebody with a permit to carry, or there's mention of a gun. But those 6 were actually traffic stops where a police officer recovered a gun, and I just think it's of note because those are not the calls we want. So the 25 other weapon calls tend to be where maybe charges weren't filed in a gun call, or they had a knife or some other type of weapon. So staffing, for most of you, you've seen our people come through here, but for some of the newer people, we had 1 officer retire, and then 1 left law enforcement, which I'll get to in a minute, and then 2 left for other departments. So we hired the 4 new officers, which were Officer Dillon, Officer Yabi, Officer Dolman, and Officer Carey. And then we continue to recruit our CSOs from Century College, and we just had 1 start about a week ago, so she'll be delivering your packets from now on. But that is probably one of the bigger challenges in policing. I think the biggest challenge is public safety officials don't always feel the support that they used to feel, and things are changing, and it's an uncertain future. But the biggest next concern is staffing. When our big departments in the metro here are recruiting and hiring, and they need to be hiring 200 and 300 officers, and they're only getting 75 applicants, that's a concern. We are doing okay, and I think it's probably because of our feeder program from Century College. We recruit our CSOs in the law enforcement program. I've talked about this before, but if they're a good student, they're probably a good employee. And so we have the luxury of knowing that with people teaching at Century, and it's worked out for us. And at that level, we train them to be what we want them, what our department should look like. So it's been a very successful program, which is why sometimes when we're up here with swearing-ins, they're very familiar faces to you. And so we do have people leaving law enforcement. That retiree worked for 37 years, I think, so definitely he rode all of the highs and lows of law enforcement. But the one that left law enforcement actually went to the post board, and I think part of it was because of the climate of law enforcement, part was family. I mean, it's a taxing job, as Chief Peterson talked about, and it's stressful when you have kids. And then 2 left for other departments, and that's just a product of where we're at when you're a new officer and you're going to be committed to nights for 6 years, and the neighboring agency is hiring and promising you day shift. I can understand why somebody would go. So we lucked out. We got 4 great new officers, and we're very proud of them. And then a little bit on the department training. So we have to complete 48 hours of training every 3 years for our licensing cycle. That's dictated in state statute. And there's a lot of discussion about how officers are going to be trained, not only at the school level, like when they're getting their degree, but also post-degree and when they're working in an agency. So they train annually on use of force, and then driving school every 5 years is required. We send them every 4 years, which is a good thing because with COVID, classes got canceled, and if you don't go within the 5 years, you can't drive emergency operations. So having it be a 4-year cycle for us worked out a little bit better. But we trained over 1,750 hours on our 31 officers in 2021, and that's a good number. But as you can imagine, we're doing a lot of training. And they're mandated to receive training. So in a minute here, I'm going to have either Paul or Sam click on that link, and we'll see how good my PowerPoint skills are. But officers are mandated to receive training in the crisis intervention, mental illness, conflict management, mediation, recognizing and valuing community diversity and cultural differences, to include implicit bias. So 16 of the hours that they get of the 48 have to have those items in there. So each year we do some department-wide training, and we make sure that we cover those topics every 3 years, because my license might be renewed this year, but somebody else's might be next year. So we have to always have that on a cycle to ensure that we are getting all of the appropriate training. So this link that I'm going to have them click on in a second is just one of our trainings. It's a very short video. It's the use of our CERT team, who we use as role players quite often. They're very good at that. I think they took it a little far there, but we trained on mass demonstrations last summer to figure, just to be ready, some tactics to make sure that we're allowing people the freedom of speech, the freedom to protest, but at the same time keeping us safe. So let's see if it'll work. I don't know.
It's thinking.
Is it? Okay. If it's thinking, it might not come up.
What? Looks like it's going to go.
It should.
It will, but we might have to do one thing. It's going there, but not there.
If it's too much, I don't want to take all night on technology, because it could be operator.
I can see it, but it's not up.
Oh, that's fine.
Flip thing you got to do.
I can certainly email it out at some point. Yeah, we'll just move on. Well, now it won't let me move on.
Hold on. No.
Should have been hostage training. All right. So on our animal control, we have that's another piece that has always changing, and quite honestly sometimes causes me some stress. We do our own animal control, typically with our community service officers. About 3 years ago, we were with Hillcrest Animal Hospital. They stopped doing that service, and we were left to find somebody new, and everybody said no. So we lucked out and got St. Paul Animal Impound to take our pets, which is awesome. They did a great job, but with the challenge everybody has, they have staffing issues, budget issues, so they recently gave us notice, and now we will be starting with the Woodbury Animal Humane Society in about a month. What I just want to highlight with that is when we changed, actually Captain Henry's idea was to put these pets on Facebook, and sometimes we really personalize it because they're not lost. It's just that their owners are lost, and they're fine. They're having a good day, but their owners probably are not. So we do have a lot of pets returned that way. I think that it's becoming, and a lot of departments are doing this, and I think people know if you've lost your pet, you should probably just go look on Facebook, and you'll probably figure out who they're hanging out with. So it's really been successful. We probably only bring one animal down every 2 months, which is great. So that's successful because it's stressful for the pet. Well, not really the pet because they're having fun, but mom and dad. The community outreach, I'm not going to go through all of them. We do the majority of the ones that the fire department does, unless they're just really fire department ones. But these are the picture on the right there is from our Donuts with the Cops at Gem Lake Golf Course with the kids. And then we do one also at the farmers market, those are my favorite ones, and it's not because there's donuts. It's just those are fun events. Touch a Truck's coming up. You'll hear about that. It's May 12th. And the bike rodeo is June 11th. And then we have all these other ones. So we have some great community interaction with that, and we appreciate the support that we get. And most of these that are done with, like the Floats with the Fuzz, it's Tallies that donates the floats. The Donuts with the Cops have always been donated by Grandma's Bakery. We've had Pizza Man do a lot of donations. So we're very fortunate because our businesses want to help, and it just makes us get to bring the treats and look good. As I said, we do a lot of recruitment through Century College, but we do participate in recruitment fairs at community events and the colleges. One of our other big ones is Hennepin Tech, because that's where they go for their last semester of school. And we try to go there and wow them into coming to the greatest community in Minnesota. And then I just want a quick touch on the partnerships with Northeast Youth and Family Services. So when I talk about those people in crisis, we do what we can. But 4 years ago, sometimes the only solution was to put them in jail to try to keep them safe and keep their families safe. And that does still happen, but we have enlisted the help from Northeast Youth and Family Services. We have a community advocate, Marley Yang, and it's a shared caseworker with White Bear Lake, Roseville, Mounds View, New Brighton, and St. Anthony, and it sounds like North St. Paul would like to jump on that. But when we have a case such as hoarding, or it might be housing, or it could be mental health, that somebody's off of their meds, they're afraid of us, but they are more willing to work with a caseworker. And they might have a caseworker, which is great, but that caseworker isn't going to work with the police, but it will work with Northeast Youth and Family Services. So it's very successful. We've had a few meetings with her recently just because they're going through changes. We want to just make sure that continues. It's a program that's much needed. Some of our neighboring agencies are bringing on full-time staff because it's much needed. I don't know that we're there yet, but I think in the future that is probably something that's going to need to take place. And then just quickly, we have partnerships with some other agencies. So we have the Violent Crime Enforcement Task Force, which we have one police officer assigned to that. So he basically works under the direction of the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department, but handles drug cases throughout Ramsey County. And then if we have one here, he is on it and taking care of it. And then he does a lot of tracking with our overdoses. We do have one member on the SWAT team and one SWAT negotiator, and these pictures are from SWAT. A couple years ago, the SWAT officers went and visited kids at Children's Hospital and just brightened their day with their superhero costumes. So on the left, Robin is Sergeant Tuma. So one thing that's changed with SWAT is that not so many people, or we don't get called out quite as often, or we don't call them out. There's a lot stricter criteria to utilize them just to make sure that we're keeping people safe and keeping the suspects safe. If they're certainly hurting somebody, they're going to come. But if they are not a threat to everybody, we might walk away from it and just let them calm down and try again the next day, which seems to be successful. Mobile Field Force, we have one officer on that. Officer Hook is on the bike response team. So when you see the protests and the riots and the cops on bikes, you'll probably see a White Bear patch. That's him. He responded an awful lot in 2020 and 2021, unfortunately. He and our SWAT person get deployed basically every time there is going to be a protest. We work a lot with the BCA on high-profile crimes, such as our fraud, sometimes our shootings. They're a great resource for us. And then, again, we have a great partnership with our suburban agencies. So unlike the fire department, we don't necessarily provide a lot of mutual aid because we have police departments around us, but they certainly back each other up. And when needed, you might see somebody from North St. Paul here, or we'll go to North St. Paul. It doesn't happen often, but obviously we're there to help each other, which is something that in my career, even in the 8 years I've been chief, I think has really improved. So it's great to see because we're all in the same goal. And then I think this is my last slide, but we hosted a Citizens Police Academy last year, which we do every year in the fall. Our CERT team started last night. We have currently 80 members, and I think there were 18 there last night starting. So you'll see them at the parades, at Market Fest. They have the high-vis vests on and the yellow shirts with the green tents. Triad is our senior citizens. I know that you've all seen them at volunteer recognition dinners. They're going strong. I think COVID was very hard for them. They're all senior citizens, and it was very hard to not meet. But that's a partnership with us, the Sheriff's Department, and Senior Services. And then lastly, we have our police reserves that donate about 2,000 hours per year, which we're really lucky. And then hopefully they become police officers for us someday. So that's all I have. Just to highlight your question, the services that the police officers and firefighters are under extreme stress. The city's really supportive of our departments, and we have a mental health caseworker assigned for our department. So separate of Northeast Youth and Family Services, she is there for our community. We have a consulting firm that works in mental health that works specifically with public safety officials. We bring her in and her partners into roll call. They give presentations. Officers can go there as much as they need. It's not required right now, but we're just trying to figure the program out. Some agencies require a once-a-year visit. We're going to that. It's just trying to figure out what's appropriate. But they're a great provider. They will, when they come into roll calls, they highlight their services, but they also give some tactics for better sleep, officer wellness, family wellness. They're open to families coming with. So it's definitely a topic that we always need to pay attention to. But we're fortunate because the city has an employee assistance program, but we do need something in public safety specific to our public safety officials so that they have the appropriate services available to them. We never know if they go unless they're in crisis mode and there needs to be further intervention. But if they just want to go and talk about some things or some marriage issues, the city just gets a bill that they know they serviced one officer, and that bill actually goes to somebody outside of the police department, so we never know, which is, I think, the best part of it because it gives them that anonymity, but at the same time, it's a service to them. I hear good things. I mean, people have said good things. I think there's trust among our people for the program, but they are a group that is used to fixing problems and fixing everybody else's problems, so sometimes it's hard to ask for help yourself, but certainly we're providing them with as many tools as we can. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
No, great job.
So any other questions?
Council, any other questions for Chief Swanson? Comments?
So either I bored you or I was really informative.
Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So catalytic converters, what can we do? What is there any hope in sight? That's the one thing that pops up like all over the place. Any perspectives or insights?
I think our mayor probably has some insight to it because I think you've done some work with that, right? But we have hosted.
He's behind all this?
No. Wow. We did host a catalytic converter event last summer where we marked catalytic converters with their license number. If you spray paint them, allegedly you can't sell them, which is great. A lot of dealerships are providing guards for them for about $300, which is really a great idea, especially if you own a Mitsubishi. They do have that, and I would say that's $300 well spent. So there is a lot of focus on it at the state level, the federal level. Let's just hope that we come up with a solution. But in the meantime, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a video from our community that somebody did that in less than 7 seconds on someone's car in broad daylight when the people were home. So it's alarming. We have an alert out right now for one of our auto or catalytic converter thieves. So, I mean, we're getting some results, but there's another thief right around the corner.
I'm just going to expand on that so you don't think I'm the guy taking all the catalytic converters. In my day job, I work with auto dealers, so I'm plugged into this issue. To expound on the Chief's answer, the issue with catalytic converters is they're not traceable. They're not labeled in any way. So you can steal them and kind of operate with impunity as you work your way through the stream of commerce. So I'll just echo what the Chief said. There's a bill in Congress to try and address this. There's lots of efforts being done at the state level, and then there's sort of a grassroots effort, I can tell you, with franchise new car dealerships in the state that are working on a pilot program that provides free of charge labels so that at least helps track them when they are stolen, and we can actually help law enforcement have that tool to prosecute them and ultimately put the bad guys in jail. So again, not me stealing the catalytic converters. Go ahead.
One other. So carjackings has been a major topic, and we hear lots about it. I didn't see it on the list. Maybe it was there and I just didn't catch it.
We didn't, and that's a good question. I'm assuming you're asking how it is in our city.
How are we doing? What's been our experience? What should we be thinking about?
Right. So we really have only had one in the past. I don't think we had more than the one last year, but we had one of a delivery driver, and we ultimately got the car back, but it's not certainly not affecting us like it is other communities. And again, like I said, we have a great resource with the Sheriff's Department, with some of these other agencies that are doing auto theft tracking. We don't have quite the problem that they have, but they certainly will help us out when we do have it, because that's what their goal is. So we're so far so good.
Thank you.
And I think maybe missed another question.
Yeah, thanks, Chief, for being here. I spent last week with the city manager at Dispatch, and I'm now even more confused about what happens on calls. But one of the things you said is with the drug overdose, you get those calls. Do you get those calls? Does the fire chief get those calls with EMS? Like, how does that interaction work? And only because I'm just wondering, how does that work?
So we both get it, and it's hard to say who's going to get there first, but those are concerning calls, because drugs are involved, and so we obviously need the medical professionals to take care of them. But we do go to all of those. If an officer's there first, they'll give them Narcan, and then obviously there's a safety concern because it's involving drugs, and drugs are illegal. So when I say that we don't go to all medicals, for sure we do go to those medicals, but they come into dispatch and they create the police call, and then they send it to the medical dispatcher probably. And then they get dispatched and we get dispatched, and in the perfect world we end up there together at the same time.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Chief Swanson, thank you again for all of your hard work and all the work you put in with the officers, and keep up the good work. Keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and again, thank you for supporting both of our departments.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6A, resolution ordering improvements, approving plans and specifications, and authorizing advertisements for bid for the 2020 pavement rehabilitation project, city project number 22-01. Mr. Copy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, I'm going to repeat some of the information that we've done over the last few actions on this item, just for the sake and benefit of those that might be in the audience for this item. So our pavement, the city's pavement rehabilitation projects start with our 5-year capital improvement program. So each year we analyze and look at all our streets. In the spring, we never know what the winters are going to do. So we review those pavement conditions every year, and we prioritize on a 5-year cycle. That's about as far as you can really project out. We know there's going to be needs well beyond that, but that's kind of the cycle that we can kind of predict and try to plan our projects. So this year, our focus is in the area that is immediately west of Highway 61 and north of County Road 96. We're doing about 2.9 miles this year, 2 miles of it being mill and overlay and full pavement replacement, and about just under a mile as full reconstruction. So we've been focusing on areas that are currently don't have an urban section, meaning curb and gutter and storm sewer, kind of old street sections. So we've been trying to hit a few of those each year to ultimately get all of our system up to a modern urban section. So the project really starts with kind of notifying the neighborhoods. We had a neighborhood meeting the last fall. We prepared a feasibility study. Council accepted it back at the, and I'm going to mess up, the February 28th meeting. That went over and said the project is cost-effective, necessary, and feasible is kind of the test for these to move forward with a project that we propose assessments on. And that's all done under Statute 429 of Minnesota State Statutes. So I'm going to go on and hit the scope a little bit. So again, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to do full pavement replacement, meaning that we're going to take up all the pavement, put it back. The pavement's in poor enough condition. The curb is generally in good condition, so we can just replace it. There's some newer, small areas of newer pavement that we can just mill off the upper surface, put a new wear course on, which is the cheapest solution when we look at pavement rehabilitation. And then finally, those that need full reconstruction, where we're going to add, so we're going to dig up the street, we're going to put curb and gutter in, new gravel section, full new pavement. And then those all include any kind of storm sewer improvements. We typically try to get any water and sewer repairs done at that same time, so we don't have to dig the street up a few years from now. We work with homeowners to look at their private sanitary sewer services. So if repairs need to be made, now is the time to do it. We have a number of years ago, a program was developed to help offset some of those costs so that the homeowners do that to help preserve our road for a much longer period of time. We'll also look at, we have about a dozen water services that we're unsure of the material. We're going to quickly excavate those to make sure that they're of a modern copper product. If we have galvanized or lead services, we want to get those replaced. They either fail, or in the case of lead, we're not allowed to have those anymore, so we need to replace those with copper. In those cases, the homeowner would also pay a portion of that cost. We'll get to that in a little bit. We also work with the private utilities to do any repairs, replacements. This project was scheduled back a number of years ago, so the gas services and mains were replaced in this area already, so just minor repairs that we're aware of that the utilities will complete. And then one thing that I will also mention, 4th Avenue is part of our municipal state aid road network, where we receive state gas tax dollars, certain roadways that meet criteria. 4th Avenue between Highway 96 and Birch Lake Avenue is one of those. It's not wide enough to park on both sides, so we officially have to adopt parking restrictions. That'll be one of the recommended actions later on. Basically restricting parking to one side. In this case, we're going to restrict parking on the west side. It currently is already on the west side, so we propose to remain there to keep through from 96 up to Weber to the north. We're going to switch it to the east side because a proposed sidewalk extension needs to be